My own daughter slid papers across the kitchen table. The same table her father and I had coffee at every morning for 30 years. Just sign it, Mom. You've never had to deal with anything this complicated. I set the pen down. 3 months later, I walked into that conference room and said, I'd like to introduce someone first. That was the moment everything Craig had spent years planning turned to nothing. If you have ever been made to feel like a burden by someone you trusted, I want you to subscribe before we go any further. Because this story is for you. My name is Madison Rivera. 71 years old, Millfield, Ohio. The kind of town where the pharmacist asks about your knee surgery and the woman at the diner counter already knows you want decaf. I spent 38 years as a pediatric nurse, nights and weekends, and the holidays nobody else wanted. I retired 4 years ago without much ceremony, which is fine. I was not looking for a party. I am telling this story not because I am still angry about what happened, though I was for a while, but because I finally understand what Owen was trying to do, and I came about 2 seconds away from missing it completely. Owen and I were married 44 years. He was a mechanical engineer, the kind of man who fixed things quietly before you noticed they were broken. He co-founded a small company outside of town, made replacement parts for farm equipment. Nothing glamorous, but it was steady and it was his, and he was proud of it in the way you can only be proud of something you built yourself from almost nothing. We paid off the house. We put Renee through college. Every summer, Owen grew tomatoes in the backyard and brought them in through the back door in a brown paper bag like he had personally invented the tomato, grinning every single time. I used to tease him about it. I wish I had teased him more. I worked nights for most of Renee's childhood. That was just the shape of things. I did not question it much at the time. I thought about it a lot later. In his last few years, Owen had a habit of staying up after I went to bed, in his small office off the hallway, door cracked, that narrow stripe of yellow light across the floor. Phone calls I did not ask about because I assumed they were work. A folder in the second drawer I never opened. Do you ever look back at the things you chose not to notice and wonder what you were giving yourself permission not to know? What I did notice was that Renee and Craig started coming around more in the last 2 years, asking about the company at every dinner, about retirement plans, about what Owen intended to do with his share of the business when the time came. I thought they were being attentive. Owen would change the subject every time. Refill someone's coffee, ask about the drive down from Columbus. I remember thinking he just did not like talking shop at the table. What I did not understand then was that all those late nights in that small room, Owen had been building something. Not for the company. For me. Owen died on a Tuesday morning in March. He was 74. The stroke came fast, and then it was done. And then I was standing in our kitchen with casserole dishes on every surface because neighbors kept leaving food on the porch, and I did not know what else to do with it. The sympathy cards sat on the counter in a pile for a week because I genuinely could not figure out where they were supposed to go. The house sounded different. Not quiet exactly, just different in a way that I cannot explain cleanly, and I stopped trying to. 1 week after we buried him, Renee and Craig came through the front door with a leather portfolio and a set of printed documents. They sat down at the kitchen table. That table where Owen and I had coffee every morning, where we read the paper and bickered about nothing, and sat in comfortable silence on Sunday afternoons. Craig set the portfolio down and opened it like he was chairing a meeting. I remember the sound of it, the leather flap against the wood. What would you have done, sitting across from your own daughter at that table, watching her not quite meet your eyes? Craig spoke in what I now think of as his managing voice. The company needed active leadership. The transition should happen quickly. I had no background in manufacturing or business operations. He said it plainly, without apology, the way you explain something to someone You have already decided, cannot understand it. Renee added that her father would have wanted someone in charge who actually knew how these things worked. She did not look at me when she said it. Craig slid a document across the table and offered to purchase my interest in the company. I did not know what the company was worth then. I found out later that the number on that page was less than a third of it. I picked up the pen. I want to be honest about that. I held it, and I was maybe 2 seconds from signing. Something made me stop, and I could not tell you what it was exactly. Maybe 38 years of learning to pause before you act when everything feels urgent. Maybe just my hand not moving the way I expected it to. I set the pen down and said I needed a few days. Renee's face did that thing I recognized, the tightening around the eyes I had not seen since she was 16 and told she could not do something. As they walked out, she said, without turning around, not to overthink it, because I had never had to deal with anything this complicated before. The door closed. I stood in the entryway with one hand flat on the wall. Did not cry. Just stood there for a minute, then went to the kitchen and poured the rest of my coffee down the drain. That night, I went into Owen's office for the first time since he passed. The desk lamp was still plugged in. I turned it on, and it threw that same yellow light, and the room smelled like machine oil and old paper, and something else that I am not going to try to name. I sat in his chair and looked at the shallow drawers and the stacked technical catalogs, and I did not know what I was doing there. I had spent 38 years knowing exactly what to do in an emergency room. I had no idea what to do in my own house. I think about that a lot still, how a person can be completely competent in every room except the one that matters most. I opened the top drawer looking for a tissue. Instead, I found a small tin box. The kind that used to hold suture thread, the kind I carried in my nursing bag in the early years. I had thought I lost that box 2 decades ago. I picked it up and it was lighter than I expected. Inside, there was a USB drive and a folded piece of paper in Owen's handwriting that said to watch the video first, not to sign a single piece of paper, and was signed at the bottom with just his initial. What do you do when someone who is already gone reaches out and tells you exactly what you need to hear? I plugged the USB into Owen's old laptop. Owen appeared on screen, sitting in that same chair, under that same lamp, looking straight at the camera. He said he had recorded it about a year before he died, after his cardiologist told him the heart was not going to hold up the way they had hoped. He did not tell me because he was afraid Craig would find out and interfere before everything was in place. He was sorry for keeping it from me. He hoped I would understand why. 5 years before he died, he had transferred 35% of his company shares into a living trust with my name as the sole beneficiary. He had also transferred 3 mechanical patents he had registered over his career. Patents currently licensed to 2 regional manufacturers, generating steady annual income. He told me to call Sylvia Park before I called anyone else. Then he looked at the camera for a moment without speaking, and the video ended. I watched it twice. Then I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a while. So I honestly could not tell you what I was feeling. I know what I was not feeling, and it was not relief yet, not exactly. It was more like the moment in a hospital when a situation that could have gone very badly has not, and you are still in the room with all the equipment beeping, and your hands are still steady, but something in your chest needs a second to catch up. The next morning, I called Sylvia Park. Her office was above a hardware store on Main Street, in a building that had been repainted so many times, you could see 3 different colors at the edges. The receptionist offered me water, and I said yes, even though I was not thirsty. Sylvia came out herself, a compact woman in her 50s with reading glasses pushed up on her head, and she shook my hand and did not waste time. She confirmed everything Owen had said. Trust properly drawn, notarized, filed with the county. USPTO records showing all 3 patents assigned to the trust by name. She handed me a bound portfolio nearly 3 centimeters thick. I carried it to my car and sat in the parking lot with it in my lap before I started the engine. Just for a minute, just to feel the weight of it. 2 days later, I drove out to meet Del Hutchins at a diner on Route 40. Del had been Owen's partner from the beginning, retired now, living about 20 miles out. We ordered coffee and pie that neither of us ate much of. Del had a way of talking that reminded me of Owen, careful, no extra words. He told me Craig had made 3 separate informal offers in the 6 months before Owen died, each time below market value. Owen had turned him down every time without explanation. Craig had been working toward something that was no longer there. Del stirred his coffee and said he thought Owen had known for years how this was going to go. Sylvia had also explained something Owen built into the trust that I had not fully absorbed the first time through. A protective clause. If any family member tried to pressure me into surrendering my interest, within 2 years of Owen's death, the patent licensing income would automatically redirect to a local charitable foundation. He had thought about this specifically. He had built a wall around it before anyone came knocking. Did you notice the careful people in your life are often the quietest about what they are doing for you? I thought about Renee then. Not with anger, with something heavier and less clean. I thought about the night shifts, the dinners I missed, the way she had stopped asking me to come to school things by the time she was 11. I thought about all the children I sat with in that hospital and what I had given up to be there with them. Owen had mentioned it in the video, gently, without accusing anyone. Renee had been carrying that for a long time. Craig had figured out how to use it. I do not say that to excuse what she did. Understanding a thing and forgiving it are not the same, and I was not ready to confuse them. 2 weeks later, Renee called to schedule what she called a family business meeting. She said it was time to finalize everything. Her voice had that settled quality, like the conversation was already done. I said I would be there. The morning of the meeting, I put on the cardigan I wore my last day at the hospital. Navy blue, a little worn at the cuffs. I did not think too hard about why I reached for it. I drove to the low brick building on the edge of town, the same one Owen drove to for 30 years. 8 employees were already in when I arrived. A few of them nodded at me in the hallway. They had known Owen. I nodded back and kept walking. Craig and Renee were already in the conference room with their attorney and a stack of documents arranged like they had already written the ending. Craig stood up, thanked me for coming, said everything was in order, and pushed the transfer paperwork across the table. He expected me to pick up the pen. Have you ever had a moment where you realized someone had completely miscalculated who they were dealing with? I placed both hands flat on the table and said I wanted to introduce someone first. I sent a short text. About 30 seconds passed. The door opened and Sylvia Park walked in carrying a green folder. She laid out that trust documentation, the USPTO records, and the notarized transfer filings in front of Craig's attorney and spoke clearly without preamble. 35% of the company's equity belonged to me under a properly executed living trust. 3 active patents belonged to the same trust. No transfer of these assets was valid without my willing consent. That consent was not being given today. Then she stepped back and folded her hands and waited. I watched Craig's face. He looked at the documents. He looked at Renee. The employees on the other side of the glass partition could not hear anything, but one of them had stopped typing. Something had shifted in the room, and it was visible even through the glass. Craig picked up his copy of the documents, stood up, and walked out without saying a single word to me. Not one word. I heard the front door of the building open and close. Renee stayed for a moment looking at the table, then followed me to the parking lot. Gray Ohio morning, the kind where the light sits flat on everything and nothing has a shadow. We stood a few feet apart next to my car. Renee said she had not known Craig was going to go that far. She said it quietly, like a fact she needed to put somewhere outside of herself. I looked at her, and I saw underneath the adult face the girl who used to fall asleep at the kitchen table waiting for me to come home. I told her I knew, and then I told her she had let it happen anyway. She did not say anything after that. I got in the car and I drove home. Craig's plan fell apart the way plans do when the foundation is not actually there. The financing he had structured depended on equity he no longer controlled. The banks withdrew. I did not do anything to make that happen. I did not need to. Over the next several months, I worked with Sylvia and a financial advisor named Howard to understand the full scope of what Owen had built. I took notes in a spiral notebook the way I used to in continuing education classes. I am not a businesswoman, but I am organized and I know how to pay attention. When I finally understood what the patent income looked like on an annual basis, I knew what I wanted to do with it. I leased a small space near the library, fitted it out as a basic examination room with a waiting area, and called 2 retired nurses I had worked with years ago. Both of them said yes before I finished the sentence. On the first Monday we opened, I arrived before 7 to unlock the door. Gloria Tanner was already on the bench outside in her winter coat, holding a paper cup of coffee, watching the street. I held the door open and told her good morning. She said she had been waiting for something like this for years. Owen gave me my independence. I spent a little while not knowing what to do with it. Then I remembered who I was. If any part of this felt familiar to you, I would really like to hear your story in the comments below. And if you want to hear what happened between Renee and me in the months after that parking lot, I will tell you in the next one.